Commissioners issues with our Administrator Gary Schmidt on January 25th, 2022. Gary, you're up.
Thank you, Chair Smith. All commissioners are present. We will start, and all of your items today, commissioners, you will be sitting as the Board of County Commissioners. We'll start with the consent agenda review. There are only 3 today. Shannon, would you please bring in Sean Lilligren for the first item for County Council? We'll wait just a moment for Sean. All right, hello, Sean. So the commissioners, your first consent agenda request is for County Council approval of a settlement agreement with Nathan Stonebreaker. Total agreement is $240,000 funded by the County Risk Fund, some of which does include county general funds. Sean Lilligren is Assistant County Counsel. Would you please give a quick update, Sean?
Certainly. As stated in the staff report, this was a motor vehicle accident from 2017. We've been litigating this, as you know, at executive session, a number of updates on litigation. And we, with the help of a mediator, reached a tentative resolution subject to your approval for $240,000. As you know, this was a complicated case from the injury perspective. He did have a traumatic injury to his head, brain injury, and other injuries throughout his body. He was evaluated by doctors. We litigated for literally years. And as the mediator said, I think this is a very good resolution from the perspective of both sides. So unless there's questions.
Thank you, Sean. Any questions or comments from commissioners? Any objections?
No.
Hearing none, thank you.
All right, thank you, Sean. We'll add this to this Thursday's business meeting agenda. Next, Shannon, would you please bring in Malcolm McDonald? We'll wait just a moment, please, commissioners. There you are, Malcolm. All right, commissioners, next request for consent agenda, community corrections. Approval of an intergovernmental agreement between Clackamas County Community Corrections and Portland State University for the development of phase 1 to create an assessment report that summarizes key priorities for an equity plan. The total cost is $18,000, funded by the State of Oregon Criminal Justice Commission, Justice Reinvestment Grant. No county general funds are involved. Malcolm McDonald is the Director of Community Corrections. Go ahead, Malcolm.
Good morning, Commissioners. Malcolm McDonald. This had previously been approved by the board. It required some changes. Portland State required some changes to the intergovernmental agreement due to an error on my part, so I apologize for having to bring it back. County Council has reviewed the changes and approved. So no additional. This will help specifically for the local public safety coordinating council, again, to develop an action plan to develop an equity plan moving forward.
Any questions or comments from commissioners? Paul, your hand is up.
Yeah, just real quick, Malcolm, the way it reads in the packet today, it makes me ask the question when it talks about phase 1, is there a phase 2 or 3 or next steps that would involve general fund, or are we obligating ourselves to any other financial incurrences?
No, there's no obligation to any additional financial incurrences, any additional phases. My intent is to have that come out of Justice Reinvestment, and the Criminal Justice Commission is having some additional funds we'll be able to apply for in addition to the Justice Reinvestment we've already gotten if needed. So I don't foresee any additional or any county general fund to have to be spent on this project.
So what this is really going to be a report and a tool for the committee to review.
Correct, and help continue to build a equity plan for the local public safety coordinating council and help us be competitive for justice reinvestment funding in the future by having this plan and moving forward with it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fisher?
Thank you, Chair Smith. Nice to see you, Malcolm. Really support this effort, and I would love it if you wouldn't mind circulating that report to commissioners, or at least to me, once it's completed. It's I'm sure it will be really interesting and worth a read. So thank you.
Happy to. Thank you.
Any objections? Hearing none. Thank you, Malcolm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm. Final consent agenda request. Shannon, please bring in Daniel Neibauer. Wait just a moment, please, commissioners.
Okay.
All right, hello, Daniel. The final request for consent agenda is from Disaster Management, approval of a facility use agreement between Clackamas County and the Clackamas Town Center Mall for COVID vaccine emergency disaster-related use of facility. This agreement has no monetary value. No county general funds are involved. Daniel Neibauer is Interim Director of Disaster Management. Go ahead, please.
This just allows us to use the facilities we've been using in the town center for vaccine distribution. The previous agreement had expired, and so we're simply continuing our relationship with the town center and making vaccine available to the community members.
Any comments or questions from commissioners? Any objections? Seeing none. Thank you, Daniel.
Daniel, stay in the room, please. So thank you, commissioners. Those are it for a request for consent agenda. We'll put all of these on your business meeting for this Thursday. You have a short list because you do have a short business meeting this Thursday. That's why you see such a small amount of consent agenda items. So thank you for that. Chair, with your permission, let's jump ahead to the advisory boards and commission appointments so Daniel can help answer any questions. Shannon, would you please go ahead with this?
Yes, we just have one advisory board and commission today, the Emergency Preparedness Council, which is staffed by Disaster Management. It currently has 18 openings on their commission due to the Emergency Preparedness Council being newly formed. 74 applications were received and 18 are recommended to be appointed. Their recommendations are as follows. For voting members, Brent Perry's first term, Richard Napon, first term, Kimberly Abels, first term, Leah Sundquist, first term, Bruce Lloyd, first term, Cassie Wilson, first term, Teresa Robertson, first term, Jeffrey Rubin, first term, Allison Clue, first term. I think we can assume all of these are first term. Terrence Niedermeyer, John McLean, Malia Kupilis, Gary Hunter, Tracy Lambert, and Dana Lord, and 3 ex officio members, Jim Walker, Bradley O'Neill, and William Mesner.
I know that I've been monitoring this somewhat. I think staff has done extreme amount of care in going through the application, and it's why it's taken them so long, because we have had so much interest in this. And they went through the application process, and first of all, zones were established. So although we had maybe multiple applications for the same person in the same zone with the same criteria, the goal of this emergency council was to have it countywide and each zone have equal representation with their skill set. And if you see the spreadsheet, they have what their occupation or background was. It's just, just one little line here. That one little line doesn't begin to even describe the depth of knowledge and wealth these people have. I mean, we have PhDs who want to serve on this. We have people who are experts, are subject matter experts in their field. And I feel so honored that we have an emergency council that this commission can work with. And going through the final process, Daniel came into my office and we had about 3 or 4 left. He says, what do we do with this? One of the vacancies that we had left was health, and we had originally designed that we have a hospital board member or a doctor or somebody serve on it. Well, during this time of COVID, it's very difficult for them to engage in any more voluntary activities. But guess who applied? Just randomly. Dana Lord applied just to serve on the council, and as you know, she is an ex-county public health director. And we interviewed her, and she has so much energy. And we didn't say that she was going to be appointed to the quote health position. We just talked about it. She has, since she left the county, she's been working in a couple different fields, and she's had some additional training on emergency preparedness. And she is one of many people on here that I feel so fortunate that are able to serve and going forward. Any questions, comments from commissioners on this? For instance, our ex officio members, Bill Misner, he's from Portland General Electric, and that's going to be very helpful in time of a disaster. And then we have the gentleman from Charbonneau. It sounds like, he's, does all this from Charbonneau, but he's like a 40-year retiree from Portland General Electric. So he knows those systems as well. So these people just don't have one area of expertise. They have a lot of crossover, which made them really desirable to help Clackamas County move forward. And Daniel, my hat is off to you and your staff who really took your time and did some good work on this.
Great.
Thank you.
Any comments or questions for Daniel?
Excellent, Daniel. Thank you.
I'll accept a motion to approve.
So moved, Chair.
Commissioner Scholl has approved, has made a motion to approve the appointed members for the Emergency Preparedness Council. Commissioner Schrader has seconded that. Any further discussion? Oh, Sonia, your hand's up.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I'm dealing with a Zoom emergency. Somehow it crashed on my computer. So, Chair Smith, I didn't hear all that you said, but I'm pretty sure I can anticipate all of your comments. I was very impressed with the packet, very impressed with the work that staff did, very pleased with the level experience, the broad brush. I second everything that Chair Smith said, and this is a great day in moving forward for resiliency in Clackamas County. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thanks for your support on that. And I know all my commissioners are going to be just really pleased about moving forward and developing something that's never been done before. Thank you for your support. I see no other comments. Shannon, can you take the poll, please?
Commissioner Fisher,
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl,
Aye.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader,
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much, commissioners and Daniel, for the work.
Thank
Here.
you.
Thank you, commissioners. Next, Shannon, would you please bring in Dan Johnson? Wait just a moment, please.
Dan asked that I also bring in Mike Besner. Is that all right?
Yep, that's fine. Okay, next is Countywide Vehicle Registration Fee, Trailer Fee Reduction Proposal. Dan Johnson, Director of Transportation and Development, Mike Besner, Assistant Director. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Chair Smith and Commissioners. The Clackamas County Vehicle Registration Fee went into effect in January of 2020. Revenue from the fee supports the Community Road Fund, or the CRF program, which funds congestion relief projects, local road paving, and safety projects on county roads. These are priorities which were established by our community for our community and are being overseen by the 15-member Community Road Fund Advisory Committee. Since the inception of the program, the primary concern that we've heard from our community has been around the licensing of trailers. These are obviously trailers that are larger in size, requiring licensing by DMV. Mike Besner and I are here to share today a discussion we recently had with the Community Road Fund Advisory Committee and a recommendation for your consideration. With that, I'll turn it over to Mike to share more details.
Thanks, Dan. And this is basically, for the most part, boat trailers and horse trailers. By the ordinance that we have, they pay the same registration fee that a car does. By law, we're required to charge them something, but the law does not require us to charge them the full $30 a year. The bulk of the complaints that I've heard, and I heard most of them because DMV was handing out my work phone to people who called them for a while. So the bulk of the complaints that I got were the vast majority were just about trailers. I didn't get really anything from people who were driving cars. So we explored this. We looked at what would happen. There's about 5,000 trailers registered in Clackamas County. If instead of $30, we changed the fee to something lower. And we went to that, as Dan mentioned, we went to the Community Road Fund Advisory Committee and talked about it. We as staff kind of floated even just something as low as $1 a year, talked about, and $5 a year. And the committee, the vast majority of the committee thought $5 was a good number to settle on. They thought $1 was not enough. Some of them actually own trailers and pay it, but they actually said the trailers do cause a little wear and tear on the roads. They cause wear and tear on the shoulders, and they thought that a little bit more than $1 should be paid. So we're here to see if the board would like us to put something together to reduce that fee for trailers. We're recommending the $5 because the committee did. And to do that, we'd have to talk to ODOT about amending our IGA, and I believe we would have to do another ordinance to fix that fee, but we would work with county council on that.
So Mike, I want to be clear on what type of trailers, boat trailers and horse trailers. What about camper trailers? What about utility trailers?
So there's so many trailers, so many kinds of
So
trailers.
are we only talking about boat and horse?
It's the
there's
trail.
a wide, vast, okay, because I own, like I told Martha, I own everything, my husband does, in everything category, and we're ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. And as you know, you don't use it. The use on these are sporadic through the year, and I'm really glad that you folks brought this forward. So utility trailers that are hauling equipment and or rock or stuff, hay, that type of stuff.
So what I can tell you for sure is it does not apply to travel trailers, campers, and motorhomes. We are not charging them anything, and because the law doesn't allow us to be frank. So those are exempt from a local registration fee. Utility trailer by name, I'll be honest, I'm not 100% sure. If they're paying the $30 right now, it would change it.
I believe, I say this with a grain of salt, and we'd be glad to follow up on this question for you, Chair. Fundamentally, utility trailers fall into such a wide variety, and DMV has a scope or a requirement on the size and scope of that trailer. So for example, if you have a 5x8 small trailer, there's no licensing requirement. Right. But if you have a larger utility trailer, there is a licensing requirement for that. It's basically on the weight and size and scale of the trailer.
Yeah, I think you're right on the 8 foot. Now, you say these trailers cause wear and tear on the roads and the shoulders, but consider, board, that they're being hauled by a pickup or some other vehicle that is paying the full amount of the vehicle registration fee. And so it's really a double hit on that. And so that pickup or SUV that's hauling the trailer is paying the fee to make up for the damage done, if indeed it is done. Paul, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'm supportive of the $5 fee, the reduction to $5. So we're not adding a fee, we're reducing it to $5. So I'm supportive of that. I just want to let people know that most utility trailers that people buy for their yard use are, most of them are not licensed, as Dan said. So they're not paying a fee today. They won't pay a fee tomorrow. Some people have car trailers that don't require to be licensed, but some of them are licensed. I have one of those where I chose to license mine. So I'm paying, I'm paying that full vehicle registration fee. So, but most trailers aren't, and the larger ones, like Dan said and Mike said, that are a certain weight capacity, they have to by law license those. So,
Paul, I have a question. You say a car trailer. Is that like those enclosed cargo trailers that you see? Is that what you mean?
Both flatbed and enclosed.
Enclosed, yeah. Okay, so the enclosed cargo trailers do not have the vehicle registration fee?
Up to a certain weight, they don't.
A county vehicle registration.
Correct.
Yeah.
So they're not all licensed unless they hit a certain requirement. So most of them are not licensed.
Okay, so I'm in full support of this too, Dan. I just want to make sure who it applies to. So when we take action on this, or you're going out and do it, can you report back and just let us know? And Dan, you have your hand up?
I do. Thank you so much, Chair, for giving me a couple more minutes. Yes, we will get back to you on that and affirm that for you when we come back and report back. Secondly, I want to make sure, since we are in this public forum, that we have a significant number of projects that are queued up for use with this community road fund, and that this reduction will have no sizable impact to those projects based on the number of trailers that we are seeing. I thought it was important to share that. So,
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from commissioners? Mark, your hand is up.
Yeah, I think this is a very good idea in view of the public sentiment towards the vehicle registration fee in general. Reducing these trailer fees down to $5, I think is going to be very well received by the people in the county.
Thank you. Commissioner Fisher?
Thank you. Question about just the transaction cost of doing all of this, the staff time. Does it take other priorities, put it at the end of the list? We're always cognizant of this is on the work plan, this isn't on the work plan. That's my first question, then I have a follow-up.
Do you mean the cost of making this change?
Yeah, just that I call it a transaction cost, the time for county council, the taking away from other priorities, possibly that are on the list of things we need to do. I guess is there a cost to this, or is this a relatively easy thing for a government to do?
Well, I think it's relatively easy. Like I say, we'd have to modify an IGA with ODOT, which is something we do all the time. And even if we have to pass a revised an ordinance to make the change, I think it's relatively simple.
Okay, well, that helps, and it doesn't push off other work that's important to do.
Not our work, no.
Oh, good. I love that answer. And then my comment is that I love that Dan brought this, that Mike, you and Dan brought this to us, because this is how government is supposed to work. We have an advisory committee. It's the road fund committee. It's our citizens that come together to review everything, to provide input, and then we get to hear from you what they're thinking about. And I just applaud you for bringing this to us, and I am in support of moving forward.
Okay, yay.
Full support from the board the way it looks. Thank you, Dan and Mike. It's always a good thing to be able to do something that's fun.
thank you all for the kind words. We'll report back to you.
You bet.
Thank you.
Gary?
Dan and Mike. Next, commissioners, your budget committee. As you know, the county budget committee, there are five county commissioners on the committee and 5 public members. Of the 5 public members, you have 3 vacancies. The recruitment is closed. You have 7 applicants. My question is, of course, commissioners, you would like to interview the candidates, but you have not identified which one of you would like to interview the candidates. In the past, you have all interviewed the candidates. So I just wanted to ask which commissioners would like to interview the candidates for the budget committee openings. And it can be all of you if you want, but just want to confirm who wants to do it.
I'd like to do.
Yeah, so Martha and I have been talking about it. 7 candidates. If we interview that, if we have more than 2 commissioners, I'm going to tell you right now, it's going to be an all-day process.
Okay.
And it's going to be open to the public. And if you commissioners want to spend the entire day doing it, that's one thing. Additionally, Gary, I've been asking the other department for their applications, and I've been sent over 2 different packets of last year's applicants. And I still haven't got it, and Martha requested it also. Yeah, and so we're still waiting on that. And the thing is, for people out there, because my schedule is so packed, I don't get to sit down necessarily and read everything in its entirety. Maybe I get to read 1 or 2 today, and I read 1 or 2 tomorrow, and I make notes. So when I ask for information, it's important that we get it in a timely manner. Paul, your hand is up.
Yeah, Chair, I would like to be part of the interviewing process. When we have done it before, it was not public, and we actually, we had, the applicant would sit before, if there were 3 commissioners, either each of them individually or double up on 2 interview and then 1, but done in a way that it's not public.
Well, Gary, we have to notice the meeting if 3 commissioners are present because it's a quorum. Do we get around that somehow with this?
You get around it by you only do interviews 2 at a time. So
No,
two-
we're not going to do that. We are not going to do that. No, that is, look, because I don't have the benefit of the third commissioner, what they asked. And I'm not going to go back and sit and do that. Paul, last time you and I interviewed the candidates as vice chair, you and I interviewed, so there is precedence for doing just the chair and the vice chair. We need to get these positions filled, folks.
Chair, there's far more precedence of the model that I just described.
Well, that's fine, but there's a new chair in town, and I strongly recommend that it's the chair and the vice chair. When you and I did it, my other 3 commissioners acquiesced, says, fine, go ahead. But I just, look, this is a very important committee. We have a list of 7 candidates. If any of my commissioners want to take a look and read their bios, give their input, submit a question for the 2 of us to ask, that is really the process that I would like to see going forward.
It is a very important committee, and we have spent, unfortunately, most of the years with, I would say, some difficulties with the budget, and many years in which we were not had a structurally sound budget. So it's important to me. It's probably important to me in a way that I've been here long enough to know, you know, and understand the budget probably and skill sets as well. So I think I have that right and that option to. It's not going to take any time away from you or Martha if you choose to interview it. But I'm not opposed with the chair and the vice chair being part of a twosome to interview those folks. But I still have the right to do an interview. Thank you.
Sonia, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, I'm really trust Tootie, you and Martha to give us good recommendations, but I don't have a problem with Paul joining you and having it be noticed. I mean, what's the concern there? Do you think it would take longer or
Yes.
and take longer because more questions from commissioners or?
Yes, because we get into these and we ask, we may have 2 or 3 questions that are really violent, so let's say each commissioner has 3 questions. I mean, that's 45 minutes because you have the intro and we have 7 candidates. Just do the math. It's exhausting. I mean, Paul and I have been on these before. With Paul and I, it's been exhausting. And I'm just trying, I think, Martha has a good set of eyes. She has.
Thank you.
And Paul and the 3rd commissioner, just submit your questions. Gary.
Yes, so my advice is not to have 3 of you at one time. So that's unfair to the candidate to have a public interview so that it's not more than 2 of you at a time. You all get to make this decision. You all 5 of you vote on this when it does come before the board. The purpose of the interviews prior by 2 or 3 of you is just to give feedback to the rest of your colleagues. So we can make this work any way you wish, commissioners.
If I can thread the needle a little bit, I know why Paul wants to do this because he's got a lot of budget experience. How about we actually make sure all of our commissioners, if it's the chair and vice chair, just for this go around, can we make sure that we sit, I'd be willing to sit with each commissioner looking through these things and getting their questions and really kind of going through what they think. I would commit to that time commitment, but then you and I would do the interviews, Tootie. But maybe I could make sure that everybody's questions get answered. Would that be okay? Would that be better?
Fine with me. That's fine with me. Yes.
And I would commit with Commissioner Fisher, Commissioner Savas, and Commissioner Shaw. I mean, I would do that, and then that way we do the interview process, but we would make sure that everybody's viewpoints are kind of in the question piece. Can we at least try it? We usually, anybody that wants to interviews. I generally step aside because my attitude is I trust my colleagues to do it, but I like the idea of the chair and the vice chair at this point, and I probably should step up to the plate at least once in a while and do the interviews too.
Thank you, Martha. We have 2 other commissioners in the queue, or 3. Commissioner Fisher.
Martha, I just want a correction. I think you step up to the plate quite readily.
Really?
Another option is that there could be Chair Smith and Vice Chair Schrader, and then Commissioner Savas. And I mean, I'm happy to join you, Commissioner Savas, if you want to do a second round of interviews, have the candidates go through a second round. I think it's important that if a commissioner ever feels strongly about being included in anything, we need to find a way to facilitate that. And Paul's been, I mean, we've been doing this for a long time now, and he has been absolutely on it when it comes to sustainable budget, really pushing when people really didn't necessarily want to hear what he had to say. And we have had challenges on the budget committee. And so making sure we get constructive, thoughtful, part of a team, looking through things, it's important for our process that about who ends up on that committee. So I guess I hear what Gary's saying, not have a public meeting because it's concerning for the budget committee members, but I do think we need to find a way to have Paul have that opportunity to interview.
Thank you, Commissioner Fisher. Commissioner Shaw.
Yes, I like Commissioner Schrader's idea, the chair and vice chair doing the interviews, and then Schrader meeting with the other commissioners. So we have an opportunity to scrub through the recommendations from the chair and vice chair. That'll give Commissioner Savas a chance to make any objections to the recommendation. Then we can talk about that before it goes to the board for a vote.
In fact, we could have, qualify for an executive session before we bring it to the full board? I don't know. Probably not. Okay.
Probably not.
Okay, so then we can just have an internal discussion. I see your hand, Paul. Just be patient, please. And then, a discussion is saying, these candidates rise to the top and maybe some of these don't for whatever reasons. I mean, I think they're probably all good candidates. I have not seen what their qualifications are. I'm going to tell you that right now. I have a list of names and that's it. I don't know anybody on the list, maybe but one. I don't even know him really well. So I have no built-in bias going forward. Paul, you have your hand up.
So I agree with Gary completely. It shouldn't be a public meeting. It doesn't have to be. We've done this before. Frequently we've done this. So, been to this rodeo several times. There's no imposition on Chair Smith or Bartha in their process. All it is just one more interview. The candidate themselves sit in. They can be timed. It's not a big deal. No interruption. It's another perspective. I can't think of a valid reason, as important as this is, why we would not include anyone willing on the board to be involved. It's no hardship on yourself, chair or vice chair.
I know.
I'm not saying you by yourself is a hardship. What I'm concerned is any commissioner conducting an interview by themselves and then giving the other two feedback, I think is an unfair advantage to the candidate.
So are you suggesting that if it was with Commissioner Fisher and I, that would be better?
I don't care.
Okay, then if that's okay, then maybe Commissioner Fisher would join me.
Yes, I'm happy to, Paul.
Okay, there you have it.
Okay, so I'm hearing Chair Smith and Commissioner Schrader will be one interview team. Commissioner Savas, Commissioner Fisher will be the second interview team. We could do it all on the same day and the candidate will just have two interviews. We can pop them out pretty quickly.
Gary will coordinate later.
And I just want to make sure that Commissioner Scholl gets some input too, please.
And that's the problem with the 2-2s. Commissioner Scholl is left out on his own as if somehow he is not worthy of it. And he has budget experience, Paul, just because he hasn't been here 10 years. By what you've done is you've excluded one commissioner entirely in this process. I don't appreciate that. You and I set a precedence for interviewing budget committee candidates and the planning commission. And the other commissioner said, fine, the chair and the vice chair are doing it. Now that you're no longer vice chair, you're doing this stuff. And frankly, I don't appreciate it.
Well, one of,
Chair, I take exception to that. That's a radical mischaracterization. If Mr. Scholl wants to interview the candidates by themselves or with me, and Commissioner Fisher wants to interview, I have no quarrel with that. But I don't see how you can go 360 degrees around the circle and then change the perspective of being exclusion, calling out exclusion.
Well,
all due respect, I think any commissioner should be able to interview, whether it's one-on-one or two-on-one. If you're more comfortable with two, I'll go two. I have no intention or even thought of excluding anyone. Frankly, it seems the exclusion, I mean, never mind, I'll stop there. I'll be respectful.
that's a good thing. It's a good thing you're stopping there because I'm going to end this conversation right now. We're going to move on to the next agenda item, Gary.
and I'm in my happy place, everybody. Hi.
Good. That's nice, Martha. We're ending the conversation. Go
Okay.
ahead, Gary.
Thank you. Next item, your business meeting agenda for this Thursday, January 27, 2022. It's 10 a.m. via Zoom. You have 4 items on the consent agenda: public communication, commissioner communication. That's it. You must finish your meeting within 60 minutes because you all have an event afterwards. So it's a very short meeting. But if you have any questions on any of the 4 consent agenda items, please let me know prior to Thursday, and we'll answer that for you. Next.
Commissioners, I'd like to manage this meeting for time.
Sure.
Depending on how many public comments we have, we're going to have to set probably a limit on commissioner communication. I'm thinking maybe 2 minutes at the end of the meeting, depending on how many people. If we don't have many people in the queue to testify, then we can certainly extend your amount of time, but we need to be out of here over to a lunch. So I'm going to manage the meeting for time, and I'm hopeful that my commissioners will go along with that. Gary.
Very good. Thank you, Chair. Next, Commissioner Schrader, you added an item, Good Jobs Challenge Grant Support Letter. There was a draft letter in your packet and a memo about this request from Clackamas Workforce Partnership.
Yeah, and I actually had it pulled up. I don't have it pulled up in front of me, but I'm assuming everybody read it. This is simply in support of a grant application for workforce dollars from the the federal Department of Jobs.
I have that, Martha, I have that. It's work systems. The
Yep.
Columbia Willamette Workforce Collaborative, is that what that is?
And our workforce board is part of that larger
And
collaborative.
are they applying for the grant and we're giving support?
We will, they are applying as the collaborative, but our workforce board is part of the collaborative.
I see.
So any money that is dispersed will be equally dispersed to our workforce board if they get the grant dollars. So
Any other comments on this request? Commissioner Scholl?
could be
Yes,
easy.
I think Commissioner Schrader's letter should be signed and sent forward.
Great.
Good. Thanks.
And I don't know if we just want the chair to do it on behalf of the board of county commissioners. I'm fine with that. Or if we all want to sign it, it's up to you guys.
Chair is good.
Okay.
That's fine. Any
Okay.
other comments on this request?
Anybody?
I recommend a motion, Chair, to approve the support letter.
I'll accept the motion from Commissioner Scholl.
Yes, I move to accept the support letter for the Good Jobs Challenges Grant Support.
Second.
Thank you. Any further comments on this? Shannon, please take the poll, excuse me.
Commissioner Fisher,
Aye.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl,
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader,
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Staff will prepare a letter for the signature and it will be sent out. Thank you. Gary, what's up next?
Thank you. Next, Chair Smith, you asked to add an item, the USS Oregon commissioning request.
Yes, we were all invited to an event last week at the UFW Hall 1324 here in Oregon City. And in your packet are 3 little information requests. The United States Navy has named one of their brand new submarines, the USS Oregon, and it's a Virginia-class submarine. And it's really a big honor. It's a nuclear submarine, and the people who serve on it are highly intelligent and highly skilled. And what is evidently common practice, and I'm learning all this, so if any of you have any more knowledge on it, please chime in. In submarine commendations, they have what they call a boat sponsor. And a boat sponsor is somebody who goes out and tries to create community around this boat going out, because when submarines are deployed, usually they're for 6, 7, 8, 9 months, maybe even longer, in total isolation away from their families. And what happens is when they're out being our good servants on a submarine, life happens to their families back home. Oftentimes a kid gets sick, or there's a car accident, or somebody's father is ill. And this offers support to the families of our deployed people who are on the submarines. And it's all kinds of good stuff. The ship sponsor, the boat sponsor, is Mrs. Dana Richardson. Her husband is a 4-star admiral and was the head of naval operations, and he is now retired. Other boat sponsors include Hillary Clinton, Michelle Obama, and Dr. Joe Biden, just to name a few. So the fact that Dana Richardson is a boat sponsor is a really big deal. And I believe she is that because of her husband as a 4-star admiral, which I understand is rare. She is also an Oregon Navy. And of course, when she married into the Navy family, they traveled around all over the world, but she has a big heart for Oregon. And I think maybe that's why she was assigned this. This ship will be commissioned, this boat, I'm sorry, it's a boat, not a ship. This boat will be commissioned in the East Coast, and then it will come to Portland, I believe in May, for its second commissioning, and it's a really big deal. I have asked Gary if we could sponsor at the highest level. It's a $25,000 sponsor. I'm hoping that will create a lot of interest and activity. I believe this is in keeping with our goals of supporting the veterans, but this is also active military. And when I was at the VFW, many of our veterans pleaded to me to have the county support this. In fact, one of them came up to me, introduced himself and says, "Tootie, Clackamas County needs to step up and do their part." And I said, "Well, what part would that be?" And then he gave me this wonderful folder with a lapel pin. And I sat there for an hour and just listened to a lot of people. There is a lot of support for this. I want to talk about the logo on the paper that was sent to you. As you can see, it's an outline of the state of Oregon. And in the middle of it's Crater Lake, as the deepest lake in the United States. At the bottom, there's an eagle with 33 feathers, and the 33 feathers signifies that Oregon is the 33rd state admitted to the Union. It has its number at the bottom, SSN 793. There are 2 salmons on each side representing the state fish of Oregon. And you see this little blue line that goes from the bottom right up through the top. That signifies the Oregon Trail. And it ends at a star that is in the middle of the O for Oregon. That star is Oregon City, the end of the Oregon Trail. And as the county seat located in Oregon City, I consider that really an honor to be able to support this submarine, United States Navy, and the families who are serving on this. So I wanted to bring it forward to you, commissioners, to get your thoughts on this. Paul, you have your hand up.
Yeah, well, great job on presenting that, and I'm supportive of that. And as a person or kid that spent his time at the Long Beach Naval Shipyards and have had a lot of members of my family in the Navy and friends, I strongly support this and love to be as much engaged as possible.
Thank you, Paul, and I really appreciate that, and I hope you are. It will be quite the ceremony, I think, in Portland. I understand it probably will be docked in Hawaii because that's what they do, but I'm still getting more information. Any other comments from commissioners?
I would love to see us do this. It'd be great.
Thank you. Commissioner Scholl, your hand is up.
Yes, I think this is a good idea. But I would be interested to know what support the other counties in the state, because this SSN vote is, should be supported by the state as a whole. So yes, I think this is a great idea, but let's look at what the rest of the counties are going to do too to help out.
Deschutes County, I believe, has made a contribution, and they are going around and talking to the other counties on this. I don't know what the state is doing. The city of Oregon City, I talked to Tony Conkle. Their council listened to a presentation on this. And I think he said they're considering maybe, I don't know. But other jurisdictions will have an opportunity. I think if Clackamas County can come out in full support of this early on to say, hey, we're making a splash, come along with us. It might help others, Mark, to do it too. But your question is very good. Gary. Oh, Sonia, your hand's up. Are you on mute, Sonia?
I am looking for a memo describing this. I've been having computer issues, so I didn't get the first part of what you presented. I don't see a memo online. I've searched my email. I don't see one. I'm not sure what to search for.
Yeah, I saw it in something that Gary sent out. Was that an email?
I emailed it on the issues list update around 3 or 3:30 p.m. yesterday. It should be posted online. If not, Shannon, please make sure it's online.
Okay, yeah, I don't see it online unless I'm not seeing it correctly.
I will correct that. And Commissioner Fisher, I just emailed it to you.
Okay, I just want to read it, but I probably would. So right now I would have to abstain if we're making a decision because I'm not quite understanding, but of course, always in support of our military and in support of military families. Absolutely, but I do want to read so I can be informed and aware.
You made me remember something, and it's also support of the servicemen who are out at sea. For instance, they could buy, for instance, crafts for them or something to occupy their time that not necessarily they can afford or that the Navy provides. You know, the Navy's wonderful, but yet when it comes to additional family support, I think sometimes that falls through the cracks. And this is a one-time ask, by the way. And Gary, you say it's in our budget or we have money?
It's not budgeted, but I have a fund where I can address commissioner requests that come up through the year. So yes, there's funds to pay for this if you choose to do that.
And Gary, what is our next action on this item?
If you'd like to make a decision today, I'd ask for a motion. If you want us to come back with the information Commissioner Shull has requested, we can do that and bring it back to you for you to make a decision later. Your decision, your call.
I'm happy to make a motion at this time.
And I think, thank you, Paul. And a second, please.
What's your motion, Commissioner Savas?
Motion is to approve the $25,000 participation in this in the USS Oregon.
Martha seconded, although you're on mute, I'm pretty sure that was the second.
I seconded that. We'll get it on.
And Commissioner Shull, yes, more participation, but I think that is always going to be changing as more information gets out.
Well, I was going to ask if Commissioner Shull might want to work with some of the AOC counties and get them on board with it.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
That's where I think we have to go. And which committees are you on, Commissioner Shull? You're on.
Legislative.
Okay, well, that's a good one to be on, to maybe see if you can get that on their agenda. And the Veterans Committee that they have too might be another one where they make a request.
Yeah, okay.
All 36 counties should be considering this.
I mean, you can give as little as $100 and have your county listed. So
Or individual or county, you know, I think it'd be a good thing. This would be a wonderful thing for all 36 counties to give.
it would be, and maybe we make that part of our endeavors, try to get all the counties on board.
Yeah.
Mark, if you'd like to help with that. And
Yeah, I'll work on that.
And let me
Okay.
know if I can help you, assist you in speaking with the counties.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, Shannon, would you call the poll, please?
Commissioner Fisher,
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl,
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader,
Aye.
Commissioner Savas,
Hi.
Chair Smith.
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Gary, what's up? Thank you very much, commissioners. I appreciate your willingness to do this. Gary, what's up next?
Thank you. Final item today is Commissioner Communications. You have about 8 minutes left. Go ahead.
Who wants to speak first?
I'll go first if you don't. Okay. I'll just go through this very quickly. Last Wednesday, I was on the Clackamas County Coordinating Committee C4 Metro Subcommittee meeting with Commissioner Savas, who, by the way, is very masterful in this transportation issue. We went over everything from A to Z on it. Some of the cities are still asking ODOT questions about how tolling, congestion pricing, and diversion are going to affect their city. ODOT's behind the power curve on answering those questions. On Friday, I was on the Reimagine Oregon meeting with Commissioner Fisher, briefed them on the Clackamas County plans for mental health services for culturally specific groups. I think it was well received. And thank you, Commissioner Fisher, for the introduction. And thank you, Mary Rumbaugh, for the briefing on mental health. And yesterday, I had the privilege to be on the adult drug court graduation. It was very motivating to hear the very positive life stories of the people that graduated yesterday. Judge Liniger, thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to speak. And that's all I have for you today, Chair Smith.
Thank you. Paul, you want to go up next?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I was not able to give you my Thursday morning Jpac update because that Jpac meeting transpires just before our business meeting on Thursdays, the third Thursday. But yeah, we had quite a rigorous discussion both on Wednesday, as Commissioner Scholl outlined, and on Thursday morning at the Metro Jpac meeting. A lot of developments have happened, but there seems to be almost unified testimony Thursday afternoon at the OTC. Chair Smith was one of those as well, who testified to the OTC on this matter about I-205 and not being first or not being the guinea pig for the area. It's complex, I think there's 7 major points, but I also want to speak out loud about one of them this morning that I want you to keep your eye on, because I think it's important to the communities that we represent as counties, and of course the cities represent their constituents as well. But just a small reminder, we got behind this project or promoted this project, supported this project, and pushed for this project because of the negative impacts to our local communities with respect to diversion, people cutting through the neighborhoods, trying to shortcut the bumper to bumper traffic on the interstate. So there's several advantages to reducing congestion, including climate benefits of reducing it. If it's done properly, you'll get climate benefits as well. But more importantly, it's about the diversion. So just a quick reminder, in 2010, in the recession, when I came on board, during that 2007, 8, 9, 10, there was not that much traffic because everyone was out of work. Not everyone, but a lot of people were out of work, and there wasn't a lot of traffic. So what happened was that locally neighborhoods like Willamette Falls Drive in West Lynn, Borland Road, Stafford Road, they saw some relief. And then when the economy started taking off again, they saw not only it come back to those normal times, but the economy got so hot and the population was growing that it became worse than ever. So the study that ODOT is doing saying we're trying to get them to look at the base year of around 2010, 2012 as the base year, but they're choosing apparently to use the worst diversion ever as the baseline and telling us and putting in their materials that it won't be any worse than the worst. Well, that defeats the purpose of us supporting the project in the first place. So again, I just want to keep your attention on that, or apprise you that it is about, I think our best argument on behalf of our constituents is going to be the diversion, let alone the cost. That's a big issue for folks as well. Even though we got to find a way to fund the bridge anyhow with money. But the point of the matter is, ODOT's got to come up with a solution for diversion. So our neighborhoods like Oregon City and Canby and West Lynn, Lake Oswego, the Stafford area, Gladstone, all of us along that corridor are not impacted by people trying to shortcut, getting to their appointments on time and speeding through our local neighborhoods. That's not acceptable. So that's my update. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Paul. Sonia, I guess you're up next.
Thank you. Do we have like 30 seconds?
Go ahead.
Probably the most important piece to update is during the Reimagine conversation, there was a talk about a voting rights bill, and there was a call from or suggestion from the governor for local jurisdictions to weigh in. I put my thumb up, although I didn't really know exactly what they were talking about because they just talk of bill numbers and this and that. So just to let folks know, Martine is working with our government staff with the other 3 counties, with Chris and Trent, to get a picture of what this might look like. And when I have more info, I will bring it back. Commissioner Scholl was also there. He may have other insights, but I wanted to let you all know that. And then other than that, I think that's my only update that I must tell you today.
Thank you. Commissioner Schrader, you're up. You're on mute, Commissioner Schrader.
We actually had one of our last Willamette Falls Locks Commission meeting, number 18. We're working on how we're handing it over to the Locks Authority. So Commissioner Smith, get ready for our recommendations sooner than later about how we're going to do that. And then we'll be handing that off. And this has been a long time coming. And I'm glad that we spent with a number of advocates through the years, giving a shout out to Sandy Carter, who really has been the one who has long-term, years and years and years been working on this issue. So I'm excited to finally see the authority move forward. I also attended the West Advisory Committee meeting. I've been acting as a liaison to those folks, and I have to tell you, a great group of people. And they are probably one of our best run departments. I feel very, very, I personally think they're going in the right direction. They're looking out for ratepayers. They're looking ahead to the future of what the capacity needs are going to be and what expansion needs would be. And they do everything right. So I'm really happy to be able to do that. Also, I basically attended the monthly union president's meeting with Chair Smith, which was always enlightening for me. They really are open conversations, Chair Smith, with our union folks. So we are all on the same page of how we are all serving the county. And finally, I'm trying to stay caught up on the executive leadership, executive leadership program from the National Association of Counties. I do classes every week. I reflect every week. I have meetings on Thursday and Friday with the NACO groups as we go through this whole leadership class virtually, which has its own sets of difficulties, but they have it designed so we have large spaces where we can communicate with each other and reflect on our readings and where we're going with this. And one of the key things we just went through is having a positive mindset as a leader, and that a leader always has to be on, and a leader can't have a bad day. I thought that was pretty interesting. So that's why I'm very lucky to have my puppies with me, because they always put me in a good mood, and that just helps my attitude and leadership immeasurably. And somehow I'm going to have to mention that to the rest of the group. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, commissioners. Yes, I attended the union president's meeting monthly, and it's always good to hear from our workforce and what their issues are. I really like it. I also attended the chairs and mayors meeting. They absolutely loved that the joint letter that we sent out, a request came from our mayors that the county helped them compose a letter, not unlike any of the other transportation letters that were sent out. It mirrored our transportation values that we have approved. It was sent to the OTC. When I testified at the OTC, I mentioned that letter. All Clackamas County mayors signed on to that letter regarding tolling and the efforts and all the things, all the issues that we've all mentioned that are difficult to do. And so I'm thinking that was well received. Thankful that we are able to have a voice in this. We got an email back with a press release from the OTC that mentioned a lot of items that were testified to, but I did not read in that press release anything about diversion and the inequities in tolling, if I am correct in my evaluation of that. And that distressed me a little bit. So with that in mind, we'll just have to keep banging our drum and making sure that we're heard loud and clear on that. And with that in mind, we're going to take a little break and we will come back at 11:10 with the rest of our sessions. Is that okay, Gary?
Absolutely, Chair, yes.
Thank you. To the Board of Clackamas County Commissioners session on this January 25, 2022. Gary, what's up next?
Thank you, Chair Smith. Next is Administrators Housing Task Force Housing Session #1 update, and in particular, a discussion on shelter policy. Shannon, if you bring in Rod Cook and Emily Klepper to start, and we'll see who else they want to bring in for their session. This is finally coming back to you, Commissioners, on information and discussion you've asked for months ago, and I thank you for your patience. Rod Cook's the Director of Health, Housing, and Human Services. Emily Klepper is Policy Advisor in the Board of County Commissioners Office. They'll give a quick update on where we're at. And to the staff, I'm sorry, but you get 18 minutes for any presentation you wish to make. So that gives a full 30 minutes for the board to ask questions and go into discussion. So I'm sorry to staff, we're cutting short what you may have planned to say, but really the key is to make sure the board has time to give an update and discussions. First, Rod, who else from your staff did you want in the room?
Brenda Durbin, Vahid Brown, Tony Carter.
Okay, great. So Shannon, if you please bring them in, and Emily, I understand you'd like to kick it off, please. If you please go ahead, Emily.
Yeah, if I may, thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm sorry, I need to get a little oriented on my screen. Just 1 second. Good morning. So as Gary said, I'm Emily Klepper with County Admin. So I'm going to take a quick minute to set the stage for today's discussion, and then I'm going to turn it over to Rod's team. At your direction, the county administrator has pulled together a task force on housing, and this interdepartmental group is made up of folks from Health, Housing, and Human Services, Council, Public and Government Affairs, Transportation Development, and County Admin. And we are meeting every other week to look at emerging issues and gather information with the goal of bringing back housing policy items to you for direction. And this task force is also charged with doing some follow-up and due diligence activities as needed. This session is our first update for you, and we plan to bring back a series of policy sessions with a variety of questions. However, due to board interest and the potential for Project Turnkey to come up next month at the legislature, we decided to start here. So we all recognize there's so much about housing that we could talk about, but we really want to focus your conversation today on the question in your packet, which is there a need for a permanent shelter in Clackamas County? And if so, what does it look like? So with that framing, I'm going to turn it over to Rod now, and he's going to take you through some data and the rest of the discussion. Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you for giving us the time to have the first of many detailed conversations with you about transitional housing options. As mentioned before, we're here today to focus on the question of acquisition of a motel hotel as part of our comprehensive county housing portfolio. I have with me today representatives from each part of the housing continuum to ensure that you're fully informed before making any decisions. First up, we have Brenda Durbin to talk about the need for permanent shelter and data trends. She'll be followed by Vahid Brown to talk about the transition housing and shelter capacity, key aspects of a hotel motel transitional shelter model, Project Turnkey as a possibility, and types of service needs. And then I'll end with any of the options that you may want to at least consider for us to move forward on. So with that, I'll give over the mic to Brenda Durbin. She's the Director of Social Services.
Thank you, Rod. Good morning, commissioners. I'll spend just a minute or two talking about what we know about the demand for shelter services in Clackamas County. So for many years, Clackamas County has supported the Coordinated Housing Access Line. This is the one number that anyone who's in a housing crisis can call to access the variety of housing services that are available in Clackamas County. So it's a great way to facilitate access. It's also a great way to collect data on what the current population looks like of folks who need some housing assistance. On page 2 of your packet, we have a couple of tables for you. The first one talks about, shows you what our current demand is for these services. I'll define a couple of the terms that you see here on page 2. Chronically homeless means that an individual has a disabling condition and has been experiencing homelessness for a period of time, or has had a series of homeless experiences over a number of years. Literally homeless means that someone is sleeping in a place not fit for human habitation, car, the street, etc. So these numbers are not going to include people who are doubled up or couch surfing. So what we see in total, and then we've also been able to sort this data inside the urban growth boundary, outside the urban growth boundary, people who are living in unincorporated areas, and then people who we don't have information on. So you'll see that we have 539 households who need housing assistance who are living inside the urban growth boundary, 107 outside the urban growth boundary, and then 309 who live in unincorporated Clackamas County. The majority of these are adult-only households, meaning they don't have any children, and maybe a single person or a couple. Then we've been able to split.
Brenda, do you say 309 in unincorporated? Did I hear that? Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, and those unincorporated folks could be inside or outside the urban growth boundary because there's a bit of the area inside and out. So then on the second part of that first table, we have split these numbers out by certain subpopulations. The numbers don't add up to the total because these are just some sort of particularly vulnerable populations. So we've got numbers for you for youth households. So these are households where the head of household is age 25 or lower, older adults, 62 plus, survivors of domestic violence, and then veterans households. So you see these are pretty big numbers. The second table here, we talk about what the changes over the last 3 years. So we've captured the data from 2019 and then the data for 2020 and showed you what the difference is. So we've seen a 15% increase in adult-only households, a 25% increase in families with children, and a total increase about a little more than 18%. So what this data tells us is that there are significantly more adult-only households who are unsheltered. However, this is the current inventory really lacks capacity to serve all of these adult-only households. We saw that there was a dramatic increase in the need for youth households, and this could be attributed to some additional resources coming in that have allowed us to do more outreach and to have more services available to that population. I think a really exciting thing about these numbers is the big decrease in unsheltered veterans. And again, this could be attributed to the additional resources available to that population. We're down now to just 63 veterans who are looking for housing in Clackamas County. And then when we look at the inside versus outside the urban growth boundary, the need for services inside the urban growth boundary is about 5 times greater than outside the urban growth boundary. And when we look at some of the communities outside the urban growth boundary, we see that we have 25 folks in Malala or the surrounding areas who need housing, 24 households in Canby, 19 in Sandy, 10 in Estacada, and 10 in Boring. So I think it's pretty clear that we do need some additional shelter capacity in Clackamas County. We have been utilizing motel shelters for over a year now. This is an expensive option. It's sort of analogous to the emergency room. You know, we know the emergency room is the most expensive part of the medical sort of system, but it's a part of the system that really needs to be there in order to preserve life and safety. Some of our neighboring counties have purchased motels, some of them through the turnkey project turnkey. So I think that's the big question today is how do we want to proceed with increasing shelter capacity? I'll also note that with the ability to add the housing navigation onto our motel shelter program, we've really seen the benefit of having households in a stable situation, getting some of their basic needs met as they work with their housing navigator to move to longer term and much less expensive housing options. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me, Chair Smith. This is Vahid Brown, the Supportive Housing Services Program Manager. In the interest of time and bearing in mind Gary's instructions around the available time, I'm going to move to the rest of this this document really quickly and just kind of touch on some highlights. The foregoing is really the critical piece, the state of the need that Brenda covered. That need is not met with the current capacity within Clackamas County. That's the next page of your packet. Has a system capacity table. That table on that page of the packet has an updated version further down. There's a memo from January. That table was produced in December. I'm sorry to be a little bit confusing, but in mid-December, there were additional transitional housing units that are no longer available because they were retired at the end of the calendar year. So the more accurate data for the current capacity of our system is in the memo further down, the next document within the packet. And so the overall total number of beds available in our system is, as of today, 588, not 730. And that reflects that loss of some temporary COVID-related emergency beds that were counted in our system as of mid-December, but are no longer available. So I won't reiterate all of the numbers there. You can see that 588 over the course of as a total of the entire system is not half of the number of unsheltered residents in Clackamas County. So there is a mismatch, as you know, between the capacity and the need of significant scale. In terms of key aspects of the motel shelter program, I think the board is pretty familiar with how that program has been operating, but very briefly, we have a coordinated entry system. We have a process for prioritizing the most vulnerable households. Those folks are given access to our sort of limited resources with respect to shelter first. So folks who are utilizing motel shelter in Clackamas County are coming to it through our coordinated entry system. They're being prioritized based on vulnerability. There are shelter services provided by contracted staff. Currently, the Father's Heart Street Ministry is our partner in the motel shelter programming in the currently existing version. We did see that when there were on-site contracted staff at motel partners, we had better outcomes, both in terms of transitioning to permanent housing and in calls for service to law enforcement. We had fewer of those calls for service when we had on-site staff. Also want to highlight, we had a long-standing partnership with the DA's office, the Sheriff's Department, code enforcement, the motel owners, the shelter operators, social services, bi-weekly meetings to triage and identify issues and work together to address public safety concerns related to the motel sheltering program. Really want to highlight the contributions and efforts of the Sheriff's Department and the DA in that work. They were great partners, and they continue to be great partners. As you know, Project Turnkey was an opportunity in 2020, a state grant fund for the acquisition of motels for shelter that was explored in Clackamas County at that time, though it did not result in a property purchase. So, and as you know, there is now discussion amongst legislators of a potential reviving of the Project Turnkey Fund for the acquisition of properties in Oregon. There are some estimates with respect to the costs. The range of costs are quite broad. In terms of capital for the acquisition of a motel shelter in Clackamas County, according to our brokerage partner, we're looking at a cost of between $3 and $15 million. Again, that's quite a broad range, and it covers a very large range of the size of motels. Shelter services are approximately $27,000 to $30,000 per month. And then there's some estimates related to the costs of the critically needed services to transition folks who are accessing shelter into permanent housing. Housing navigation is approximately $15,000 per household as a one-time cost. Case management services are approximately $500 a month ongoing per household, and rental assistance provided through the Supportive Housing Services Program is around $1,500 a month per household ongoing. And reiterating again what Brenda mentioned earlier, we have had a very successful rollout of our housing navigation and housing case management program with the Supportive Housing Services Program, moving everyone that has been accessing motel shelter into permanent housing with the help of 5 contracted partners in the community, 2 of them who are new to Clackamas County and who are proving to be great partners in ending homelessness for an unprecedentedly large number of people in that short period of time. We're looking at a couple of hundred of permanent supportive housing units emerging out of this work. So that's a success in an otherwise somewhat dismal picture underlining the continued need for additional resources for shelter. Apologies for moving so quickly through those materials, and I will turn it now back to Rod Cook to wrap us up.
Rod, you're on mute.
Commissioners, so you have in front of you the options that we had laid before you. At this point, I won't read all 4 options, but I will say that our recommendation was option 1. And given conversations I've had with commissioners and what we talked about in executive session, understand that this option is to proceed with looking at where we go next. It's not purchasing, it's not anything that would get us in front of the board, but it does give staff permission to continue the effort of looking and moving forward on the overall issue of this turnkey type of program. Option, I could read it, or Chair, I could give it over back to you, and then we can get to the questions, because I'm sure there's plenty of them.
Rod, your feed was breaking up, so you cut in and out.
Okay.
But I know my commissioners want to talk about this, as do I. And I've written down a couple criteria in my notes, and then I have a statement also. But Paul, your hand is up. Paul, you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you. So I have a couple questions and some comments, but one I want to get back to Vahid, because that was the most recent thing that's fresh in my mind right now. And Vahid, I appreciate your presentation. I appreciate all the good work that you do. I know you know this work very well, and you got a lot of experience. You have a lot of notoriety for the work that you do. So thank you for that. One question I had about the navigation, was that I think you mentioned it was $15,000 for the navigating service. Could you tell me what that kind of includes? It seems like it's a large number, but there again, I don't know what navigation is. So I'm not the one to say it's high or low, but trying to understand why it's so high. Is it a fixed cost? Is it, or an average? So can you enlighten us, please?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Commissioner Savas. It is a mix of things. So some are fixed costs, and really it's kind of averaging what we see amongst those fixed costs over a large number of households. So a part of that $15,000 per household per year is the staff salaries for the navigator, the individual who's working with the household. Ideally, the navigation services are concluded within 120 days. So We're looking at a navigator who's working with about 10 households at a time. That's our kind of cap for case management services. So, we're for part of that $15,000 is paying for the staff time of that person who's working with about 10 families, trying to place them into housing within less than 3 months or less. Well, 4 months at the upper end, depending on the barriers. And the rest of it is really addressing the barriers that exist for long-term houseless households in getting into housing. Very many people, most of the folks that we work with, are going to need some very basic recovery costs, like recovering a birth certificate in order to recover an ID. There will be sometimes, very often, arrears related to previous housing losses, evictions, or unpaid utility bills from a previous housing situation. Sometimes those can be quite complicated and be in another state. And so there's often, that's often one of the things that delays the navigation process. But ultimately, to put a long story short, Commissioner Savas, there's a lot of barriers that $15,000 kind of covers the costs of overcoming, and it pays for the staff of the individuals that work with them in overcoming those barriers.
Okay, well, great. Thank you for answering that. I do want to say overall that, Rod, in your earlier part of your presentation, I think, and I want to make sure I understand your verbiage there. We intermixed permanent shelter and transitional shelter. And so I didn't know, does it mean that we want to build a permanent shelter for transitional purposes? Or are we talking, is that what it is? Okay.
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Because the reader or the listener might be a little bit confused. I want to get clarity on that. So that's one thank you so much. So the issue I think that we learned both at the last opportunity for the turnkey and also prior purchases is really about more property acquisition issues and getting expertise and people that can look at the ground issues, look at the structural issues, environmental issues, and so forth. And so I want to make sure that we put together, and Rod, you touched on it, we're not just telling you to go out and just dart out and go buy something tomorrow. But I want to make sure we have, so to speak, an understandable, comprehensive checklist of things that we will do when we're exploring that are, number one, make sure that we're buying something that's sound, we're making good investments, and we're delivering the services in an appropriate time. If we can avoid roadblocks or a sudden discovery that we need to tear the building down or rip it. And we've had, unfortunately, some bad circumstances there. So I want to get that identified as what those steps are. The one thing I would like to ask for, and I know our legislative staff aren't here, but I want to put this on the table that I think the branding of the word turnkey is great, but there might be some other opportunities that really accomplish the same thing and possibly even cheaper if we look at other facilities that aren't hotels or motels, but there maybe they're an apartment building, or maybe it's a closing retirement center that has the rooms, has all those like things. We shouldn't pass up those opportunities and be boxed in. The other thing I think is important is that we have, and this came up last round, that the amount of money that each county could have received, the maximum amount, was adequate for the real estate cost purchase price for hotels in rural areas. But when you get in the metro region, that doesn't buy the same thing and house the same number of people. So it seems to me that we make sure that hopefully that the state will recognize, if they do put this program back in place, that it's, number one, we have enough time to do the due diligence. And secondly, we have enough resources to buy something that's competitive for this area that meets the higher price levels that this area has or demands. And secondly, that it's enough money to buy something that's comparable to our population. So example, maybe a small town or rural area could get away with a 20-unit hotel that will do everything they need. But 20 units up here, but the numbers you displayed, doesn't get us very much, right? And if we're going to staff a facility of 20 or 25 or 27, let's just say, and then we have to do another one, then we're actually have a higher cost per unit because we have a whole bunch of management staff on multiple sites. So ideally, if we get a big one, 50 or plus, I think that would be beneficial. I got the other one. So you answered my question about that transitional piece, and knowing that we want to get those folks into permanent housing, so that will free up a room. So once that momentum, if you will, or that flow begins, and we have all the facilities in place, I think we can really maximize a number of rooms, whether that's a 50-unit facility or whatever. But I think we can address that. And I say that I think we can do it much better if we have some folks that are in need of either detox or have drug alcohol issues, how those are treated, and making sure we have a facility, a transitional facility that has the right kind of staff there, but doesn't put people that are families in harm's way that maybe shouldn't be in the same facility, right? So I think we need to think about, two, strategically placed, and ideally not near neighborhoods. And I've seen a number of models around that where they're on a commercial corridor, and there's not really any housing impacts, and it's got access to transit, it's got access. I have a whole list. I'm happy to share it offline. I don't want to take up all the time here. I'd like to hear the thoughts of my other colleagues, but I just want to make sure we get it right, and we do it right, and we take all the steps to engage at the right time. If we have a viable property, that we engage the local community, the businesses, hopefully we're not near a neighborhood, but if there are, the neighbors, so that they get a priority emphasis to that engagement with ourselves, staff, and so forth, so that they're involved in the front end.
Thank you, Paul. I'm going to interrupt because look, we have 3 more commissioners here and our time is very short. We're almost out of time and we haven't heard from 3 other commissioners or 4 commissioners yet. So Sonia, you're up. Paul, just send us your list or send staff your list. It's really important, but everybody needs to say something here. So Commissioner Fisher.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Smith. Paul, I really would like to see your list. It's very helpful. Your questions actually answered some of my questions. One thing that I think is important for us moving forward is the metric for which we are able to measure our success. And so instead of looking at how many people have we housed, I would really like to have confidence in the numbers of how many people are currently unsheltered and to see that number go down. We can see that clearly with our veterans population. We know we have been making significant progress there. Are these numbers reliable enough for us to get those kind of outcomes and metrics?
Good question. I don't know if they can answer that now, but commissioners, I'm going to recommend, because our time is short, if we submit our concerns and our questions to staff and they make a list and then somehow, Gary, they get back to the commissioners on this before we proceed, would you recommend that? Okay, if that's okay with you commissioners, and Sonia, that's a really good question. And how do we define success in this? You're right. Yeah. Commissioner Fisher, please continue.
Yeah, so I'm in support of the staff recommendation. And in order to move forward, I think we already gave this suggestion to have staff explore. Gary, do we need a motion on this today, or where are we?
Staff was asking for a guidance on moving forward on the acquisition, but you don't have to decide today. You can give us a general head nod until we answer your questions. There's a whole gamut of what you'd like to tell us for direction.
Yeah, we still have 3 more commissioners that need.
All right, thank you, Chair Smith.
Commissioner Shull.
Yes, I suggest we not make a decision on moving towards the hotel right now. It looks like from this morning, we see only 1 hotel available out in the county, and that's in an area where we got big pushback last summer from Estacada. And they only have 10 unsheltered people out there. Fahid mentioned we are down to 538, I think the number was, of beds for our transitional housing and shelters in Clackamas County. And on top of that, now those are all filled now. On top of that, we have another 1,000 estimated unhoused people. Is that right, Fahid, in the county?
That's correct. 588
Oh.
is the current, but yes, otherwise that's all correct.
Okay, and we're not going to be able to satisfy that, even if we do get a good motel in an area that is accepted by the city or the community. You know, car camping, now that's not attractive, but I know some cities have provided fenced in areas with central showers and bathrooms, and it has been received by the people as a big improvement, a much more secure improvement than parking off someplace in the city. That's something to look at. Also, we have a proven example of a paradigm that's worked for our veterans over here in Veterans Village. And I think we need to look at that. You know, it doesn't have to be a big village. They can be broken out for single adults, adult couples, also families with children. We can modify these things to work for each of those subgroups. But that's something we need to look at, and it needs to be economical, because we know that hotels are a hard way or expensive way to house a lot of people. And we need to be looking at taking care of 1,000, not 100. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Scholl. Commissioner Schrader, you're up.
Yeah, as I'm listening to this, I do think that we should keep our feelers out for acquisition. But I think that I agree with Paul. I think we have to have specific parameters. You know, we don't want a building that the roof's gonna fall in, kind of thing. However, the other thing I would strongly suggest is this. We have a short legislative session. I would really like to work on Project Turnkey to make it more flexible in terms of dollars for land acquisition, dollars that meet urban needs in terms of it being more expensive here in the urban area, potentially less expensive in the rural area. So I think really, again, we should keep our eye on the prize. I think we can get it done. But I also think that it would behoove the turnkey folks to look at this from a broader perspective with more flexibility. And I would strongly suggest that we work with our folks that do all our lobbying to try and make that happen, and work with AOC, the Association of Warden Counties, from both the community solutions perspective, county solutions perspective, and the human resource piece. I think that the problem with turnkey is limited us to one kind of property, and we are having difficulty, like I said, getting money to buy what we really need anyway, because the cost is high, or being able to buy something out in the rural area where, probably there it would be to scale for what the needs are, but it's not up to scale for what we need, in terms of cost and everything, and what we need in the urban areas. So that's kind of where I'm coming from with that. I do know that Estacada has land available, and we have had preliminary conversations with them. I know Jill was there at the time. So there's possibilities there. We just need more flexibility for dollars in order to make this happen. And I don't care if it's branded turnkey or whatever else we want to call it. But let's make it broader, and let's make sure we can get the money, not only to expand turnkey, but to expand the flexibility we have in terms of buying properties and land.
Okay. Thank you, Martha. I have about 7 points that I want to bring forward, and then Commissioner can have a second shot at contributing to this conversation. So it's one thing to be able to buy a property, and let's say we get funding to do that. It's quite another thing to maintain it over 20 years and provide services that's so badly needed for 20 years. I'd like to know from staff is how do we provide wraparound services on a consistent basis over time? That money has to be recognized along the same path as the money recognized to buy a hotel or any other type of facility we would be doing. And then you take staff needs to present a long-term sustainability funding source. That is essential. And let's look at the Veterans Village for a minute. That was a program whose conception, the idea came when I was on the commission on the last time it was finished on the commission when I was not here. I think there was a lot of excitement around that facility. You know, maybe there was contributions to build these little houses, but what I want to know is that is currently being funded out of the general fund. What was the initial amount that it was going to require to fund that? Emily, you know this answer, when it first came online, and what is the amount now? Because commissioners, that is general fund budget creep. And that is an item that I'm really serious about not happening. So as far as I'm concerned, commissioners, you've spent your wad on any more general funds coming through for the homeless, because we have that situation in the veterans. We cannot do this out of general fund. We have to have a dedicated funding source for the future. And number 4, I like Martha's ideas of looking at alternatives. I don't care what we call it. Turnkey, whatever. If we can use some other model, I think we need the flexibility to do that. Build a permanent shelter for transitional purposes. I think that's an important term that somebody said. I'm just repeating what my commissioner said because I'm hearing the theme going through here, okay? And then a statement was made, there's economies in scale of buying this big mega because we have the same staff to do this, but when you buy a very large structure like that, you're automatically excluding 2/3 of the county, of which Molalla is listed on here as having 25 homeless people. Are you friggin' kidding me? There's probably 200 out there, and it's because of the counts. And I've been visiting our warming shelter in Molalla, and the problem, and I'm thankful we're doing warming shelters. I'm thankful that we're doing cooling shelters, but the only place now in Molalla that will do a warming shelter is because the churches have said no more. I'm not going to go into the reasons why, but they're valid reasons. You have this facility. It's a nice facility that the city has given, or not given, but cheap rent to a nonprofit who does this. But this nonprofit, in order to be viable, to provide the cooling services and the warming shelter services when we go into emergency operations, they have to be viable for the rest amount of the year. So that is an issue. I toured them twice on our vacation. On our vacation, I was out doing homeless stuff and I was out doing shelter stuff in the snow. So these are some real problems when you say, oh, we're going to put some megaplex over here in the urbanized part of the county. You've ignored 2/3 of the county, and it's not our intent to do that. It's just we're trying to grasp at economies of scale. I will submit that maybe some of these smaller properties can be managed. Now, in Molalla, when we activate our warming and cooling shelters, the community feeds them. The community steps up where you need, and they call up restaurant, deliver it to on Kennel Street because there's that many people, and they never hardly have to buy their own food. And clothes and donations are done equally as well. So there is community support because there's a huge community awareness of this now. And then Sonia, you touched on the metric for success. Are the numbers going down? What is our metric for success? Is a metric for success saying, oh, we housed all these people? That is not solving the problem, right? We do need to establish a metric for success. And then the very last thing that I've always been harping on, what is their employment barrier? And I think we know the answer to that, but we don't know that for sure. Right now, there are more jobs available in this county and across America than we have people to fill them. Why aren't people working? Why aren't people wanting to work? And so what is the employment barrier on this? We've got to get people back to work, and these homeless people, because when you have a job, you have an identity. You have a purpose because other people depend on you. And it's so psychological and it's so emotional because in America, oftentimes when you meet somebody for the first time, hi, I'm Tootie Smith. Hi. So what do you do for a living? You ever notice it's your second question, what do you do? It's a huge identity that is really important, I think, that goes to what our success metric is. Staff, that's a lot of stuff on my list. I've written down here in case we forget. Now we have other commissioners that we can go back and revisit our comments, because I wanted to make sure every commissioner had a say in this. Commissioner Fisher, you're up.
Thank you, Chair Smith. Yeah, really good conversation. Lots of consistent ideas coming from all of our commissioners wanting to tackle this problem. One thing I don't want to lose sight of is having a continuum of different types of shelter, I believe is important. And maybe Vahid can verify or tell me that I'm wrong, but I am also hearing of a very difficult to shelter population, possibly due to the new drugs that are out there. And I know, and I sent that Atlantic article to you all, but Hooper is talked about in that national article about why we don't have a detox center because of the difficulty that it was for them because of the aggressiveness of some of the people that were going into detox. This is, when I talk about the metrics of how many people are on the street, I'm talking about pushing us to address that issue, because if we don't figure out what to do, we're just going to have more and more issues. And so another thing I don't want to lose sight of, we have the Veterans Village. Good, we've seen it, we've seen the success, putting people in a place for shelter and then transitioning them out to housing. There are other models that may be good. Bill Stewart is an expert because he's our community prosecutor and he's dealing with this on the front lines. And for the people that we're supporting through our LEAD program, we may need to look at a different type of shelter. And I do know that there are models, there's modular pods, they are much less expensive, but we may need to include that also in our continuum of shelter. And I don't know, Vahid, if you want to weigh in on that. I haven't talked with you specifically about this, but this issue is also rising to the top. The Metro Oversight Committee, Dr. Mandrell, who is one of our Clackamas County residents who serves on that committee, just shared with that group the challenges of what's called the new meth that he has seen, and his expertise is in substance use disorder.
Go ahead, Vahid. Is there anything you want to address in Commissioner Fisher's statement?
No, I think that I've heard from another number of commissioners an interest in a variety of types to sort of meet specific different needs amongst the folks that we're trying to serve. I think that's right. I think that we currently have some kind of, different types of shelter in the community, but there's gaps that aren't being filled.
Thank you very much. Yeah. We're trying to be brief here. You can get back to Commissioner Fisher with documentation. Commissioner Schrader, you're up. You're on mute, Commissioner Schrader.
Right. I don't think we should necessarily actively pursue a purchase at this time. Okay. I think that is reasonable because it looks as if we don't have the inventory that we need that kind of fits what we need. That's part of it. I do agree with Commissioner Fisher that most barriered people are usually have substance abuse issues. So I think we need to expand turnkey, and I think that we need to look at other shelter options. And I would actually ask staff if we could take a look, and Sonia should know about this because you serve on the Human Services Committee. They must have a whole group of case studies, rural, urban, and suburban, of how other counties across this nation have solved this problem. And that's why I have it on mute, guys, by the way, because I have a pack of dogs with me. If we could really get an in-depth look at some of those case studies that have worked in comparable counties, I think that would be real helpful for us. And maybe that's something staff can pull together for us. We can look it up on NACO now. You could go on site now, Sonia, and see what other counties have been doing. Because what we really need is a fit for our county, okay? And the hotel motel thing wasn't as easily done as it was done in some other counties. That's the bottom line with it. So anyway, that's it. I don't have anything else to add, except that to me is a way forward.
Yes, I don't see other hands for commissioners. Gary, could you read option 1 as presented by staff?
Yes, so staff option 1 recommends that the board direct Health, Housing, Human Services and/or the Housing Authority to begin taking the steps necessary to begin the acquisition of a hotel motel for conversion into a transitional shelter and continue to update the board in a timely manner to ensure it meets the board objectives and is consistent with county code.
I don't support the acquisition at this time either, so I cannot entertain a motion for the acquisition at this time until the questions that I presented and the other board members presented are answered. Staff, before we buy anything, you need to know how we're going to afford it. I just think that's really critical at this point. We can certainly give direction to staff. We have 6 minutes left in order to do that. And I see a couple hands up. Gary, you have your hand up.
Yes, I was just going to recommend, commissioners, you asked some excellent questions today, some of which I feel are new. So how about let staff answer all these questions, we can come back to you to help you have that additional data before you make any decisions.
Yeah, and if something happens in the legislature and they say, oh, we're going to do turnkey for Clackamas County or whatever, we can certainly activate then. So I'm flexible enough in the schedule to allow for more sessions on this. I'm flexible enough to say, well, if the legislature comes back, we can make decisions at that point. But this stuff is really hard. We all recognize it's really hard. I see 2 more hands up. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, well, I see there's just a few minutes left, so I won't be able to convey, much of what I wanted to talk about. I just want to remind everyone that, I brought this, my request is September, October to bring this forward for discussion. I appreciate the work that staff did. I was hoping to have a little bit more. I know the staff recommendation is focused on just the turnkey aspect and not the broader perspective. You certainly have content in there in the packet with about all the other different mechanisms or shelters. But I think we need to bear in mind, number one, Chair, there is resources going to be available when the supportive housing services start to flow. I want to make sure that's incorporated in a more detailed manner, whether it's the LIP plan or it's the work plan. That's still not clear. I'm glad we signed the IGA on Thursday, but I'm not worried about resources. I don't think there's any intention that general fund was going to be used here, nor is there a general fund that can be used here. We just don't have it. So my presumption, it was never general fund. So that said, I want to make sure that we make traction. Again, I brought this up in September. Was it 4 or 5 months later? And we got an hour, and it was not even really covering the topic, the broader topic that at least myself had originally had asked for. Thank you again, staff, for including some of that in there in the packet. I like the words. The words I had were really the continuum of transition shelters, and I think we need to realize we can't stereotype or categorize that all homeless people are homeless because of this, because there's all kinds of populations, and I think there were some well said things here this morning about the danger, Sonia, the danger of having people that are on drugs, dangerous drugs are dangerous. And if the next person next door in the next room over is a family with children, that's not the environment we want to have. So I think Lane County has some great models of that separation that's responsible. And I think we need to look at that. I want to make sure that we realize that that housing those people separate or sheltering those people separately is a priority. And I think they're quite different kinds of facilities. I'm not really sure that a hotel, if you will, that is specifically, if it was hypothetically specifically housed to hold people with mental health and drug problems and alcohol problems, or just drug and alcohol problems, that is something that would be open where the public is nearby, if you will. That could be really dangerous for even the public nearby, neighboring businesses, so forth. So I think to me, it would appear more suitable for families, single occupants that really need a small lift back into getting either a mailbox or their birth certificate or the prior barriers that Vahid spoke to earlier. But this is so complex, an hour just won't cover it. I'll conclude my comments there.
And commissioners, if you think of something else, feel free to submit your questions to staff or your thoughts. Sonia, your hand is up.
Thank you, Chair Smith. I appreciate that we aren't ready to go acquire a hotel motel, but the exploration and the work that staff is doing and I'm understanding will continue to do while we are looking at this. We need to be ready if the legislature does come up with resources. It will most likely be competitive and we need to be ready. This background work is important. Commissioner Savas is right. We need a continuum. There is not a one size fits all, but we do know from the research, getting to Commissioner Schrader's point, that housing first, getting people sheltered is what then allows all the other pieces to fall into place, whether that's treatment, it's a job, it's mental health support, whatever it is, whatever those services are, housing first is what the research and the modeling shows. So am I misunderstanding anything? Are we all on the same page here?
I think
Well,
we
it's
agree.
fine. Well, that's fine. I do understand housing is first, but we buy the property. And
No.
then
I'm talking about direction to staff on continuing to explore the purchase of hotel motel. Obviously we don't have general fund or other resources, but the legislature may allocate for this purpose.
Gary, would you define for us as we move forward? I'm not going to do that today. You can.
Staff is still going to, staff's going to answer every question you asked today, commissioners, and we're still going to do the potential of applying for Project Turnkey if that comes up. You've already provided that direction to us, but we're not going to do anything until you have all the data and information you've asked for.
Is that okay?
Sounds good. Thank you, Gary.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Gary.
Okay, we're going to adjourn in just about 30 seconds. Paul, you have your hand up. Please be brief.
Yeah, I want to make sure that we don't lose track of my point earlier on and also in executive session. We need parameters. And I want to make sure staff's working on getting those parameters and steps we'll take that ensure a number of the concerns we have and concerns that we haven't even talked about yet this morning. But that has to be part and parcel of what we do so we don't make the same mistake we did before, or mistakes, plural, that we made before. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Not seeing any more hands raised. I think staff has enough information from us. It's going to be very busy for a while. Maybe you already have some of that. Thank you, everybody, for participating today. And with that in mind, I'm going to adjourn this meeting.